Does anyone know what is significant about this room? So if you look closely here, it has these electrical light bulbs in it. And this was JP Morgan's living room in Manhattan. And it was the first residential property to have a fit out of an electrical lighting source. I thought it was quite interesting because it really was, the first home to have this innovation, which has obviously now really spread across every building, every building across the globe. And here was one of the first applications of it, which is just super interesting. I feel if WiredScore was around in 1880 instead of where we are today, we would have been called lighting score or electricity score, and being at the premises of that wave of innovation that dramatically changed our built world. But we are not in 1880, we are in 2024, and it's not a wave of lighting that is revolutionizing our buildings, but a wave of information technology. And Mark Andreessen, the famous venture capitalist, said 10 years ago, software is eating the world. And now we can really truly say software is eating the built world. So a lot of the built environment we're in, a lot of the decisions and the differentiators of those built assets is less about the bricks and mortar and more about how information is being stored, accessed, and analyzed to create much better places for everyone involved. So before we jump into some of the SmartScore data side of things, just a bit about WiredScore. So WiredScore as a company was founded around 10 years ago to really support tenants who are looking for space, find buildings that were well connected. This was through a joint initiative with then Mayor Bloomberg of New York City. And we came up with the certification as a way that those tenants could identify well-connected assets. Since then, there's now 6,000 assets globally that are under WiredScore certification, and that's across the Middle East, Europe, Americas, and recently, excitingly, on Friday, now India. And around 3 years ago, that client base of well-connected buildings was really struggling with the term smart buildings. They had been hearing it a lot from their design consultants, from other folks within the industries, but were really struggling to articulate what a smart building was and what they should be doing about it. So they came to us and asked us to form another certification, but looking at the smart building space. And that was the genesis of SmartScore, the smart building certification, which is run by WiredScore. Currently, around a tenth of WiredScore assets are SmartScore assets, and we're seeing that number grow year on year as the rate of adoption of smart building technologies continues to increase. Interestingly, I asked ChatGPT to create the image for this slide to represent software eating the world using a cat and mouse. And this was the image it created. And I thought it was actually pretty good and good enough to use in the presentation. In terms of some of interesting news articles that we've seen, which really highlights the role of software and technology as being no longer a addition, but almost in the driving seat of some major deals and some major things across the world. The first one that I found really interesting was Palantir, which is a large software analytics company with a lot of AI technologies, won a US Army contract to create a location and targeting system. And it was the first time a software company has actually won such a large contract. And the Army really saw the software as the differentiator within their defense, as opposed to historically what has been the hardware. So it's no longer so much about the vehicles, which are the differentiators, but more about the software, which is informing when to deploy things, how to deploy things, which I thought was a really interesting case study. And the other case study, more close to home, Yardi, the property management software, actually then became the majority owner of WeWork. So again, seeing that role of software no longer as an additional layer within our world, but almost within the driving seat. The software has been the primary entry point into many significant things that are happening across industries, and our built world is no different. So within the world of SmartScore and smart buildings, we're really calling this current era the era of adoption, and that's following the era of understanding. So when we launched SmartScore V1 in 2021, there wasn't necessarily a broad understanding of or common definition of a smart building. There was many different use cases, and lots of our clients were diverging in terms of what to deploy and how to deploy it. And we're now seeing this real widening of adoption. So going beyond just the really innovators and the early adopters, but now to a much larger swath of the smart building market. And we're seeing some common themes emerge from this era of adoption. So the first is really around an industry consolidation. We're seeing clients actually reduce the amount of smart building use cases they are deploying to a core set that are truly delivering value. So things such as digital access and energy metering, and less of those technologies that a few years ago they were really keen on in terms of whiteboarding and putting sticky notes, but aren't really well adopted. So things such as wayfinding of that nature, we're seeing a reduction in those deployments. We're also seeing smart by default in the development market. So while the development market is much smaller than it has historically been, when we are seeing new developments, a lot of our engineering companies that are working on those buildings are having smart by default as their default specification. So it's now no longer at the for the client to ask, we want smart technology. It is almost just the default spec, and the client has to instead say, we actually don't want this technology. So that will dramatically increase the expectations of tenants when they look at older buildings which may not have those technologies. And the final thing we're seeing is going from single buildings to portfolio. So we've seen a shift from where many of our largest clients in 2021 and 2022 really had smart building technologies in 1, 2, or 3 of their prime AAA assets. And now we're starting to see that shift to a much larger portfolio deployment. So rolling out technologies such as digital access control or a tenant app across 10 or 20 buildings. And that's really been the focus for some of the top of the market. So I will shortly jump into some of the data that we're seeing in terms of adoption, but to provide some context of that, I'll just introduce the SmartScore framework itself. So in the same way, the lighting revolution that we spoke about in 1880 increased the experience of buildings, increased the sustainability of buildings, increase the operational effectiveness and resiliency of buildings. The same is true for smart building technology, and that's really been the driving force of our scorecards. The way smart technologies are delivering those outcomes is what we define within 6 categories. So firstly, access and navigation, how tenants, how visitors can access the building and navigate through it to their space. The health and well-being, so how the building is optimizing for air quality and other metrics of health. Sustainability, so how resources, including energy, water, are monitored and analyzed and reduced over time. Community and services, so how end users and tenants can interact with the building and the amenities and services inside and around it. Maintenance and operations, So how the building is using technologies to enhance base build systems, reduce faults, use predictive maintenance and things of that nature. And finally, safety and security. So how technology is being deployed to increase the safety of the building, whether that's monitoring the occupancy or monitoring entries. That's then underpinned by what we call the technological foundations. So building system interoperability, how the base build systems and other technologies can communicate with each other. The cybersecurity element, so is there a cybersecurity policy in place and how well is that implemented? And finally, the building data management. So how data is stored, analyzed, and managed within the building. That not only means it can deliver the outcomes, but the risk of any data leaks and other things is dramatically reduced. And then when we dig a layer deeper and peel the onion on those categories, we see a number of different use cases within that. So, on the access and navigation side, it's about the access, the visitor experience, the elevator optimization, and that thread goes all the way along. So health and wellness is about the air quality, other well-being factors, how then that data is fed into HVAC systems to optimize occupier comfort, the sustainability about all those resources, as well as the carbon side of the equation, the community and services, what we're seeing in terms of integration into tenant apps. So access to local events and services, the ability to schedule deliveries and pick up deliveries, the ability to book space and book EV charging, maintenance and operations. So from the fault detection diagnostics all the way through to the building cleaning, and then the safety and security, really about that utilization, the occupancy and the alerts that we can give. And then the technology that's used to deliver that historically, we will all in here be familiar with the different layers of abstraction in the smart building stack. So from the base build systems through to the devices, the network, the platform, the interface, and that's how those use cases are being delivered. So what I'll do now is I'll pivot to some things that I pulled out of just our set of around 150 of the last SmartScore buildings that were finalized. But maybe I'll pause there to take a question or two if there is one before jumping into some of the data itself. And also allow myself to grab a sip of coffee. So we'll jump into what we're seeing in terms of being deployed where. So what we're looking at here at this graph is from top to bottom, all those different use cases and the level of maturity they are being deployed at across the last 150 live buildings. So this bar at the top represents the deeper green is much more mature solutions, and the red, purple, yellow is much less mature and less commonly implemented. So to take an example, building access, where has a much larger green bucket, we're seeing that as the percentage of those deployments that had a highly mature solution in relation to building access. So by highly mature in the context of building access, that is through an application or background on the phone and not with a card reader. So we're seeing that use case begin widely adopted across the majority of our buildings. Other use cases that we're seeing be much more common and highly mature is in relation to some of those access and navigation use cases. So things such as lift optimization, so destination lift dispatch, we're seeing that widely deployed in developments and also retrofitted into older buildings. We're also seeing a highly maturity in relation to the energy side of the equation, with a lot of landlords now focused on increasing the granularity of their energy metering and sub-metering in the building and using analytics to analyze that, to HVAC analytics and use cases of that nature to reduce the energy consumption of the built world. And that's really at the top end of the market. The top end of deployments. And at the bottom end of deployments, what we're increasingly seeing less and less is anything that's really using location services. So things such as the ability to find someone else in the building, or the ability to use wayfinding within the building, things that use that kind of data. We saw in 2021, 2022, but we're seeing them less and less across most markets. Equally, things that where we've seen also less deployment is anything related to the ability to monitor carbon, that's operational carbon and embodied carbon. But we're seeing hints of that increasing in its deployments. So that's on the lower end of the market. When we begin to look then across, across regions, we're seeing Asia Pacific, so Singapore, Hong Kong, those regions be really at the forefront of deployments across most use cases. So when we're looking here at access and navigation, we can see the breakdown of different regions across those different use cases. So we're seeing here, close to 100% of buildings within APAC that we've certified have that lift optimization technologies in place, and they are really leading the market across most across most use cases. So within access and navigation, we mentioned the lifts and the building access. They're the really highly mature and well deployed solutions. Closely followed by the visitor arrival. So the ability to not only get in the building yourself as a tenant, but the ability to register a guest and allow them to have a digital credential to access the building. And then the location services we're seeing far less deployed. But where we are seeing that deployed, that has been, the Middle East has led that due to some of the scale of their buildings. When we look at their health and well-being elements, again, it's interesting to see APAC be a clear leader in some of these use cases. So regions that are deploying indoor air quality monitoring, APAC is, again, the majority of their buildings, whereas other regions, the Middle East and growth markets, Europe and North America, it's still just shy of 50% in most cases. When we look about occupier comfort control, it's really about integrating that air quality data and giving occupiers the choice about how they can increase the airflow or other factors that increase the comfort of their space. And we're beginning to see that deployed now in the majority of our certified building. Interestingly, and contrary to air quality, APAC is actually much less deployed here. So from a HVAC controls point of view, we're seeing APAC buildings really not focused on giving occupiers control, but really focus on just creating healthy and great buildings using their air quality data. As well as what we're seeing much less deployed is other well-being factors. So whether such as noise pollution or light pollution, those kind of metrics, we're just not seeing deployed across regions. So just around a third of buildings are beginning to incorporate some of those other factors. On the sustainability front is where we begin to see more trend into larger deployments. So energy reporting again is the big one across regions. APAC, close to like 80% of their buildings have granular energy metering and sub-metering at a floor-by-floor level or greater. Whereas on the flip side, anything to do with carbon footprint or beginning to quantify the emissions within the buildings, it's still relatively rare. So a fifth across regions. are doing those kind of technologies. And that's where a lot of the innovation is happening, but we're just not seeing it widely deployed at the moment. With water metering somewhere in the middle, around like 50% on average, having water metering and water sub-metering, and things such as leak detection much less deployed. And then when we think about tenant applications, which is how the application you have on your phone and how you can interact with the building, some of the use cases within those building within that application are like local services. So the ability to book anything in and around the building. That's been the most widely adopted use case on tenant apps. So the tenant app for our building in London, you can book dry cleaning on it and things of that nature. So a variety of different local services. Amenity booking, now we're speaking about things like inside the building, so like rooms and things of that nature, is also just over the majority of SmartScore buildings have that technology. The ability to book EV charging is far less deployed in the Middle East and Europe, but we're beginning to see the majority of buildings, if they have EV charging in the building, the ability to integrate booking of the EV charging solution onto the tenant app. And then finally, delivery services far less deployed, around a quarter of buildings are providing that, apart from Europe, where it's near 50. So the ability to access your order things to the office and begin to track it on the tenant application. When we look into maintenance and operations, again, we're beginning to just, on average, go to the premises of the majority of buildings are deploying these technologies. So just north of that 50% mark in most of these use cases. So work order management and the ability to integrate technology solutions to facilities managers, the fault detection and diagnostics. So going from what's historically been, manual analysis of, over time data into using more algorithmic based ways to do FDD. We're seeing that more advanced solution being deployed in the majority of use cases now, with again APAC taking that leads, where it's close to 80% of the buildings there have that more advanced analytics capability. The ability to then use that data to optimize maintenance and cleaning schedules, things of that nature, has been less well deployed than the FDD itself, but we're seeing that climb across regions. Where we're seeing much less deployment and still a novelty in most cases is integrating any scheduling optimization for building cleaning, where there seems to be challenges with the bottom end of the stack. So actually being able to have the right application on a cleaner's phone to ensure that procedure is followed, where the technology has seemingly been well thought through in terms of how it should be, how cleaning floors should be optimized. It's how that's pushed out, which has been a barrier to wider adoption there. And then in terms of like safety and security, so we're beginning to see, access gates be monitored, begin to see machine learning algorithms on the video close to access gates, that being in the majority of our buildings now. And just coming up to the 50% mark is anything related to occupancy analytics and you utilizing, understanding who is in the space, what they're there for, and using that as a real safety measure. We're seeing that increase, but at the moment it's just shy of that 50% mark. I'll pause there for any questions in relation to what we're seeing in terms of what's being deployed. So there's one question in the chat, which is, I'm very curious to learn more about IB as a newbie, which is a nice rhyme in and of itself. Where do I get started? Can I confirm IB is intelligent buildings?
Okay, so yeah, it's the webinar is a 60 IBG. Yeah, yeah. Go ahead, Well.
Or yeah, maybe you're best to answer this question.
No, it's yeah. I'll start and probably can follow it up. So firstly, we have a CIBSE website page on intelligent building, and there are a number of published, peer-reviewed journal papers and books by the committee members and founder of the group, Professor Derek. Probably you can look at those books as well. Yeah. Well, can I ask a question before you go further in the comparisons between the WiredScore with other sustainability assessment tools like WELL or BREEAM or LEED? So is any kind of cross-checking of those tools, or something you're trying to kind of collaborate with those tools somehow?
Yeah, exactly. So we have crosswalks with both WELL and LEED. What that means is we've worked together to understand where the frameworks uh, uh, are similar and where there are differences. For both WELL and LEED, there's an overlap of around 10% of criteria. So we do see them as very separate tools in the market, with SmartScore much focused on the digital side of the of what's happening, whereas WELL and LEED are much more focused on the physical side of health and wellness and sustainability. So I would say the majority, I don't have the data to hand, but a lot of our clients within central city locations are deploying a suite of certifications for their assets. And the reason they're deploying such a large set of certifications is really to for tenant expectations. So we're seeing the tenant market begin to be much more mature in relation to factors such as sustainability, such as health and wellness, and increasingly now technology, despite the fact that it's quite hard to articulate. So where we're seeing a lot of barriers is with not so much barriers, but where there's a challenge in the conversation is on the leasing side and setting up occupiers as they go into new spaces. So a lot of our work at the moment is really focused on how we can enable leasing managers to clearly articulate what differentiates a certain building because it's deployed smart technologies, and why that should benefit a tenant and differentiates that building, and therefore why a tenant should move into that space. So that is the conversation where we're seeing the market go. But at the moment, a lot of leasing managers, and they'll be the first to say this too, are just not well versed to be able to articulate the fact that because this building has an independent data layer and it has all these different smart building technology use cases, therefore this is what it means to you as a tenant. So that's where a lot of our focus is at the moment. Similar to what WELL and LEED are doing, it's really a tool to help attract and retain the best occupiers.
Thank you.
And just to follow up with Abdul, maybe I'll just give a quick, Derek has some fantastic books. Maybe just a quick plug. If you Google WiredScore and SmartScore 2, there's a introduction into SmartScore, which provides also some useful references about smart buildings. But the way I like to think about it, almost if I was a newbie, is almost twofold. On the one hand, it's about the different functionalities that you can do through technology. So whether that's access a building, let a visitor come in, have good air quality, that's one side of the equation. And the other side of the equation is the technologies in place. And when we see the technologies in place, they're often referred to as different layers of abstraction, which go from the physical world all the way through to the digital world. So at the bottom of the stack is those base builds systems, the HVAC, the lighting, the layer up devices, so the Internet of Things devices, both sensors, which translate things in the physical world into digital signals, and actuators, which is the inverse, translating digital signals into impact in the built world. Through to the network layer, how all those sensors communicate with each other, up into the platform, so how all the data is stored and managed in a central location, often in the cloud, through to the different softwares that using that data to create and inform decisions, up to the interfaces. So how me as an end user or me as an occupier or operator can visualize that data and input and output things that I want to do. So there's another question in the chat, which is what kind of lift optimization technologies are you seeing? Are these directly by the lift vendors in the smart building or the smart building software suppliers? So I would say for in all new developments, it's directly by the lift manufacturer that are having those that smart building use case deployed within the base build system. But we have seen some retrofitting of and sorry, my mind's gone, but we are seeing some retrofitting of lift optimization by smart building software suppliers. So the ability to just select your floor and then the lift is optimized to bring you to that floor. We've seen retrofitted into some older buildings. So one building that I'll note as a good case study here is a famous building, 101 Collins in Australia, which was built in 1980s, and they've retrofitted that smart building lift optimization technology into their existing lifts. So I'd say while the majority of deployments have been with the lift manufacturer, we are seeing just some which sit outside of that. And Derek, yes, I'll be sure to contact you.
Yeah, thanks very much. Yes, we're doing some work on, smart buildings or stroke intelligent buildings for the BCO guide. And I think some of the issues you've discussed is very important. I do like your phrase, software is eating the world. I think that's a classic.
Yeah, and I can't take credit for it. It is I'm paraphrasing that, but it is a great quote. And it's interesting to see that software is no longer an add-on, but actually in the driving seat and
yes.
the entry point into the physical world. And it's just
Yes.
an interesting shift in the role of technology.
Yes, absolutely.
And then the other area, which is I'll just quickly show. Hopefully, you can see the screen just shift. Is and we can speak about this more, Derek, for the BCO work. Is the SmartScore best practice guide, which kind of digs much deeper into those use cases that I mentioned, into the specific functionalities and how we measure them within buildings.
Sure.
So on the follow-up, Derek will be sure to run through this also.
Okay, good.
So just to close then, just to repeat some of the areas I mentioned. We really see this era as an era of adoption. So less use cases being deployed throughout buildings at a faster rate, and not an era of exploration, which is introducing more use cases and things of that nature. we're seeing much more portfolio deployments of these key technologies that are delivering value to operators, occupiers, and landlords. And we're seeing the real innovation happen in how these solutions are done. So for example, for digital access is one example. We're seeing the same use case, so being able to enter the building using your mobile, but a lot of innovation happening in just making the latency far less. So not even using an app, but using background communication and innovation really in the how. And that's what we're seeing. So I can close there. If anyone is interested in understanding more about some of the data behind this, or has any specific insights they would didn't see today that they would love to see with the SmartScore data, please do reach out, and I'm happy to jump on a call or provide an answer.
Any questions, any kind of comments, or any kind of interesting point you'd like to discuss? Just feel free to type in the chat area, or you can just speak, turn on your mic. Well, can I ask you another challenging question? There are quite a few kind of similar kind of intelligent building, smart building assessment criteria. So SmartScore is one of them. So can you tell us, share a bit of more of what you think? Personally, I think it's useful, definitely is needed. But what is the challenges you're facing to improve your kind of scheme, or how do you compare with others? What is current situation in this domain?
Yeah. So I would say there's a number of smart building certifications. Broadly, I would say that at a global level, the advantage that we have within SmartScore is the existing base of WiredScore certified projects, which differentiates us in terms of our existing reach, which allows us to be able to quickly deploy the certification at scale. And I would say what's differentiated about SmartScore relative to some of those other smart building certifications is our standard was co-authored by a smart council, which was our WiredScore clients and some of our accredited professionals in the consultancy space. So it's really defined by the industry for the industry. But I would say the biggest challenge that us as an industry is facing right now is the evolution to performance. So at the moment, we're a design-based standard. So we look at design components, we review evidence, but we really check if the solution is there. Over the next 10 years, I imagine a lot of the how we measure the performance of the building will shift, and design-based standards will need to evolve with that shift to performance monitoring. So less about monitoring what use cases are in place, but more about monitoring the actual outcome, the experience that those buildings are delivering. And that's just an interesting space to be in. But at the moment, landlords are still seeing tremendous value in a design-based certification. So it's just interesting to explore over the next few years if a performance-based certification will take off, and how we will need to evolve to meet that, if at all.
These digital technologies could be a key for performance-based post-occupancy evaluations and long-term. It's also kind of in the commissioning kind of procedure, isn't it? So in the future, those carbon reduction EPC or discrepancies, these specs, for example, is quite important.
Exactly.
Europe, there's the European EU directives, it's all EPC based on currently kind of shifting, as you mentioned, from design stage to performance based and kind of people centered performance kind of evaluations. I don't know if you know there's a EU initiatives on smart readiness. They're looking at it looks like possibly is quite big industrial kind of movement around that. I'm happy to share with that with you if you're interested to learn more. And we learn quite a lot from your presentation as well. I don't think they quite interesting to and then
it's
collaborations.
We've seen a lot of innovation in the regulatory space, so both in Europe with the smart readiness indicator, and more locally, right? So where I am in New York at the moment, there's local law 97, which is beginning to mandate a lot of energy monitoring technologies in buildings, and that regulatory push is accelerating the adoption of these technologies. So we see the smart readiness indicator as an accelerator for SmartScore in many ways, where a lot of the technologies we are specified within SmartScore would be needed to meet SRI compliance. So it's a super interesting space where a lot in the carbon and sustainability worlds, where a lot of the regulation at the moment is driving a lot of innovation, and will only increase the rate of technology adoption. I think in Biden's in the Inflation Reduction Act bill, there's, I'm going to butcher the number, but there's multi-millions of that bill designated to reducing energy consumption in homes and offices. So it's really powerful from top down position.
Usually everything is based on design, not based on real performance. It's really scaffold innovations, how to test which one is really working well, not only to get better design status goals.
Yeah, but at the moment, we strongly believe in, and landlords also believe, that design-based certifications are a powerful agent for change. So ensuring, what's quite powerful about it is if a landlord says, I want a platinum building or I want a gold building, that really prevents a lot of things being taken out of specification in value engineering, because someone will ask, why are we doing this? It'd be cheaper if we didn't. And the answer is, well, we need to have a gold building. So there's a lot of the worlds where shrinking everything down into a rating becomes a really powerful way at just impacting change, both within the construction and the operations of buildings.
Any other questions, guys? So if there's a LinkedIn page for intelligent buildings, and we are also in the committee or the group. So if you're interested to get in touch with us, please feel free to log in on the LinkedIn intelligent building page. So I'll just post the link in the chat area. If you're not in, probably you can just join. It's open to everyone. Feel free to get in touch if you're interested in any topics, or you would like to present, or you want to hear or see in any interesting topics. Please let us know. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Will. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone, for listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day.